Negredo, the blackening, the decomposition, the confession, the first stage of the alchemical process. And if you're doing our 4-week individuation, the stage you're gonna be in for the next 7 days. So if you wanna do this and you weren't at the live last night, then stick around. But this cannot be overemphasized. This process is not for the faint of heart. If you're not ready to be honest with yourself, to do all the work, especially the readings, to step back and allow yourself to be the piece of filth or the stardust that you are without judgment, then please, just don't do this. Because I am not kidding. It is so easy to get stuck in your darkness. And if you think you're stuck in your darkness now, and then you start this process and you don't follow through and do everything I tell you, you're just gonna sink yourself deeper. So if you think it's bad now, yeah, it gets worse. But if you're ready and you understand the consequences, then let's do this. The first thing you need to know is that negredo has 2 meanings. In the first sense, it represents the initial state of you. A state that Jung called a unio naturalis, or a natural union between awareness and unawareness, or between conscious and unconscious. And this is essentially us as we are living our unconscious lives, totally unaware of our unconscious and how it affects us, or unaware of the power of the unawareness. Let's imagine that our awareness is a light, and that light is trapped inside a black hole of unawareness. That whole black hole with the light inside it is the natural union. And remember how I said that you were a pit of trauma and your ancestors had to survive a myriad of things to get you here? Well, that trauma and those memories of survival are essentially what guide your unconscious and all of our collective unconscious. Think major contributing factor to fight or flight response. Now, the second meaning of negredo is negredo as process, which is activated when you become aware of this natural union. And that's what we're gonna do this week. Girl, you just said that I am in a black hole and now you expect me to see the black hole? Yeah. This week, we're going to spend 7 days cultivating a new objective awareness. In the alchemical process, this is when all the ingredients are put to fire and essentially cooked into a uniform black matter. In symbolic terms, that would mean putting ourselves under the heat. And in psychological terms, that is the intensity of the objective eye. I'm running out of time, so I'll explain it in the next video. But listen, if you can't stand the heat, just stay out the kitchen, okay? Negredo continued. If you haven't seen part 1, go check that out. It's in the caption because none of this is going to make sense without it. Like we said, negredo as state is us, lost in our unawareness, guided by the urges of the unconscious. And negredo as process is making the unconscious conscious, putting the black hole under the heat, taking a nice long look at the stone first before we decide how we're going to sculpt it. So how do we do this? By writing. But not writing just anything. Writing out the darkness. And no, this is not journaling your feelings. Let me explain. Let's say you're prone to paranoid thoughts. Therefore, you probably identify yourself as paranoid. So first, we're going to unidentify and observe the paranoia as if it were an exotic zoo animal. And I mean really observe it. Study its nature, its tendencies, what it's capable of. Elian, this metaphor is confusing me. Okay, let's take a step back. So you're chilling with your friends, you're having a good time, someone happens, someone says something, and it makes you feel a certain type of way. An intrusive thought comes creeping in. And just as you're trying to hold it off, another one comes in, and then another one. And while everybody around you is just laughing and having a good time, you're sitting there like, I bet they were talking about it before you got here. Why would they be talking about it? Nobody cares about you. Well, obviously because no one's sitting next to you and everyone's sitting next to each other. And potential telenovelas of the sort. Now, most of us who suffer from intrusive thoughts aren't aware of a power we have. A power intrinsic to our paranoia. The power of imagination. Because I'm willing to bet that all the scenarios you come up with in your head could be like professionally produced. Like I'm talking Hollywood soap drama material. And that's why for the next 7 days, we're gonna write these scripts out. This week, instead of shooing off an intrusive thought, we're gonna thank it for coming. And we're gonna give it the benefit of the doubt. So to continue on our example, when you hear, but they were talking about it before you got here, you'll say, they probably were. What were they saying? Then you're gonna grab your journal or your laptop or your notes app and you're gonna start writing it out. Writing it as if you were watching it like a film in your head. Writing it like a script if you want. with no judgment and complete detachment. Critique the director of your mind if you want. It isn't you yet, so who cares? Not the true you. Now, while you do this, you're also gonna read. I put a couple things up on Alchemy 101 But listen, if you don't read, you will be lost forever. The motifs and archetypes that govern our collective unconscious get their power from the fact that they are part of the stories that have been written down over and over. And so to properly activate our unconscious power, we need to engage with these symbols. And no, there isn't one book that's going to give you the answers. We're going to have to read all around. Don't worry, I got you. If you started our individuation process and you're feeling a little lost and confused, then let me help you out. I've been getting a lot of texts from you guys about your different experiences. Some people are having freaky dreams. Other people are having waking visions. Someone texted me this morning saying that their journaling gave them a breakthrough for their business. But a lot of you are still confused about what to write exactly. So, even though I'm fucking terrified, I'm gonna read you the little bit that I read to the group in the live. Never in my life did I think I would be this vulnerable on the internet. But you only live once, right? So I'm gonna give you a little context first so you know what kind of space I was in. But please don't judge me. 4 years ago, I was not this person. No, let me rephrase that. I was the antichrist of this person. I was very paranoid, very depressed, living in my shadow, moving unconsciously, letting my ego dictate my every move. And my ego is possessive, obsessive, straight, and monogamous. I spent half my time projecting my frustrations onto my partner, and the other half getting high in a basement alone while watching reruns of Seinfeld. I've seen Seinfeld in full 26 times. Let that sink in. And this is all just a nutshell summary, so I'm gonna let you imagine the real thing. When I started this process, and really the reason I started this process, was because I was living with a girl who was so wonderful that it intimidated me. Like I could not function around this woman. It got to a point where I wasn't even sure if I was jealous of her or in love with her. And I tried so hard to fight off the thoughts. And just to be clear, this is one of a myriad of things that was going on, and a whole mess of telenovelas I was coming up with in my head. But the more I tried to fight them off, the more powerful they became. And so one day I decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna embrace it. And instead of trying to fight the thoughts off or indulging with them in my mind, I started setting them free, setting myself free in the process. Okay, here we go. This is what I mean by writing with detached observation. She's young, almost 24, at least younger than me, and complaining, but cool, detached, interested, and interesting. Am I intimidated by all the women who get too close to me? She studies computer design or something in the realm of math and screens, and she makes me feel old and lost, and I like her, maybe a little too much. I hate her. Why should she get to be so cool, as if nothing ever bothers her? I don't want him to meet her. He'd love her too. They'd say hello and he'd look into her pure brown eyes and that'd be it. He'd see how beautiful her soul was and she'd see his, and they'd call out to each other wordless while I watched them watch each other. Albedo, the whitening, the illumination. The second stage in the alchemical process. Ilian, you said that you were going to make a post about this every Monday, and it's Wednesday now? Yeah, I know. But hear me out. Last week we started negredo, which is the process of bringing a new objective awareness to the black hole of unawareness that we live in. And what this involves practically is doing a deep dive into our own shadow. And we do this in order to simulate what Jung calls the enantiodrama. This is a concept that Jung took from the I Ching, an ancient Chinese divination practice. And what the I Ching posits is that things must reach their extreme in order to become their opposite. So before we see the light, it's gonna get really dark. And during our live on Sunday night, a lot of the people who had already started negredo last week said that they weren't ready to step into albedo. And the thing about it is that we can't force an illumination. We need to be struck by it, like the enlightenment that comes in the Tower Tarot card. So unless you're seeing signs of illumination, you're not ready to step out of negredo. And if that's you, keep digging with objectivity and detachment. But if you have, then you can start to bleed in the practices of albedo to your process. But what are the signs of illumination? They can be anything. And believe me, you will know when it happens. Whether it's seeing someone you've been grieving in your dreams, having someone mystical approach you with an offer you never expected, being approached by someone from the past, finding an answer you've been looking for, it will resonate in your soul, don't worry. And if you felt these resonances, let's move you forward a little bit. Because now that we've made the unconscious conscious, it's time to facilitate a conversation. Albedo is the silver moon condition, and it can be easy to mistake it with transformation. But we're not quite there yet. Before we can unite the conscious and unconscious in a new, higher union, we have to make some space for them to talk. And because this is the case, we're going to break albedo down into 2 parts and focus on it for 2 weeks. In practical terms, in this first part of albedo, we're going to do 3 things. First, while we continue to delve into our shadow, we're going to start reviewing it. You want to go back through your first week of notes and start picking out key elements to note on a page of their own. These are any kind of recurrences, from characters to words to feelings, themes and situations you find yourself in, numbers, words, phrases, and any value judgments that may have slipped in accidentally. Get started on this for now, and I'll be back tomorrow with the next 2 steps. The mandala. What it is, why you should make some, and how you can make some. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Ilian. I have a master's in Jungian dream analysis and occult symbolism. I'm writing my PhD in rhetoric and cultural politics. Basically, I just read a lot about a lot of different things and learn a lot of things that I like to share. Oh, and I'm also a cat. This is a mandala that I came up with the other day. I love it. It's one of the practices involved in Carl Jung's individuation, and it literally means circle. But why do we make these? Carl Jung would draw one every single day, and he says that he gradually discovered that the mandala is really the self, the wholeness of the personality, the creative expression of your awesomeness in its totality. Now, if you're already in your awesomeness, this will serve a conservative purpose. But if you know you could be more awesome, the mandala will very subtly and subliminally allow you to meditate on your vision of your highest self, especially if that vision is not quite clear yet. My vision changes every day, which is why I draw one every day. So let me show you how to do it real quick. You want to start with this quaternity, this XY axis. Then take a little compass and just draw out circles of varying sizes. It doesn't really matter what size they are. You can do whatever you want. You can do as many as you want. Most importantly, though, just make sure that you have these 4. The Jungian basis of the psyche is a quaternity. So you want your foundation to be a quaternity as well. Next, break that quaternity down into pieces, like pizza slices. I've broken each quarter down into 5, but you can do as many or as little as you want. Then start adding the shapes. I started with a little spiral in the middle. You can add little circles, petals. I'm kind of a terrible artist, but you get the gist. Make a vid and tag me. Stage 3 of the alchemical process. What do you mean stage 3? I just got here. If that was you, hi, I'm Ilian. I wrote my master's on alchemy, and now I'm here to teach it to you. If you're not sure what alchemy is, but you're interested and you've heard of it, then check out my other videos. But overall, it's a bunch of ancient texts that talk about how to turn metal into gold. The catch, though, is that turning metal to gold is really a metaphor for turning your raw self, as you are, into your highest self. It's got 4 basic stages, and now we're at the 3rd. Citrinitas, the yellowing, or in Jungian terms, the education. Now that we've taken a good look at ourselves, have learned to detach, to observe without judgment, now that we've cleared the way for observation, it's time to give some names to the things we're working with. This is the stage where we learn our transference and our archetypes. Transference is kind of that relationship that we have with all the unconscious elements about ourselves that we see in other people. Okay, So that might have been a little confusing. Example. Remember the thing about shadow work and assertive people for those of us who were taught not to be assertive? That little tension between me and that unconscious thing that is manifest in that person has now been translated into my relationship with that person, so that their presence creates a tension for me. But this doesn't only apply to negative triggers. This could also go for somebody that you admire. That admiration is the transference. It's that unconscious element of you that you see in them that you admire. Not that admiring someone is bad, but sometimes when it gets to the point of hero worship, then there's a transference. Because rather than allowing yourself to realize and therefore develop that part of yourself, you've externalized it. Then there are the archetypes. Now, archetypes are going to need a video or several videos of their own. So for the purposes of this video, an archetype is a form, a kind of skeleton of an idea that gets refurbished and reused in culture over and over and over. There are modern archetypes, like say Karen, because when I say Karen, you can immediately imagine a Karen. Or, you know, the small town girl who runs away with the prince. She knew what she was doing when she named that podcast, because that woman is a living archetype. But then there are deep, ancient archetypes. The hero, the guide, the great mother, the godhead. And those are the ones we want to focus on right now. At the end of the day, you carry them all inside you. But let's work with the closest ones. Observe your dynamics and look back at your notes. And when you find a theme, say jealousy, narcissism, recklessness, go searching for its mythological echoes. Do you know how much femininity man lacks for completeness? Do you know how much masculinity woman lacks for completeness? You seek the feminine in women and the masculine in men, and therefore have only men and women. But where are the people? Those are the words of the archetype king, Carl Jung. It's a passage from his shadow work tome, The Red Book. And this passage specifically comes from a discussion on the Anima and animus. And what Jung is essentially trying to say here is that most of us grow up in a society that expects us to adhere to certain gender norms, and therefore categorizing us in one of two gender identities. When the fact of the matter is, we're all both, and everything in between. We aren't men or women. We're people. We can be dominant and assertive in our female avatars, and we need to be vulnerable and intimate in our male avatars. And we can do this by confronting our anima or animus. So what is the anima animus? But first, if you're new here, hi, I'm Eliane. I have a master's in Jungian dream analysis and alchemical literature. And by the way, alchemy is mainly a literary tradition. And I'm a writer, teacher, PhD researcher, and cat. Meow. In a nutshell, it's the unconscious feminine in men and the unconscious masculine in women. But I'm non-binary, so how does that work? Excellent question. Your unconscious element is going to probably be the opposite of the gender that you were born into, unless you over-identified with the opposite gender to the gender assigned at birth. And in that case, a lot of the time, both could be unconscious, or you could just already be in a higher union with yourself. And depending on which one you think is the unconscious element, you'll want to figure out where it is in terms of the 4 stages of its development. So let's start with the anima. Her 4 stages are Eve, Helen, Mary, and Sophia. Yes, I'll go deeper in another video, but take a screenshot of that. And Jung and Marie-Louise von Franz thought that a lot of contemporary men were stuck in the first, sometimes the second developmental stage of the anima, resulting in the man-child archetype that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. And if this is something you want another TikTok video on, let me know in the comments. Now, the animus in parallel has 4 stages. Although, to be totally honest, I think the animus is different, and I don't think Jung took enough time to talk about the unconscious elements of women as much as he did about men. Tarzan, Hemingway, Lloyd George, and Hermes. And I would argue that a lot of us today in our revolt against the patriarchy are kind of stuck in the Tarzan phase.